Hi Frank, thanks for making contact and thanks for the footage. Just relating to a couple of the points that you raised during our little conversation on Messenger the other day. You mentioned that you'd move your ball forward a little bit in your stance. Looking at the image on the left, the face-on footage, centre of the arc is the lead shoulder. Your ball position here, I mean the angle is a little bit skewed, the camera's not exactly square on, so that would be making it appear that the ball's perhaps a little bit further back than it is. However, if we take that into consideration, the ideal location or baseline location would be maybe 2 to 3 balls back of the centre of the arc for a sort of 6-7 iron, so shorter mid iron. Looking here, you're maybe 3-4 balls back, which again is going to create a little bit too much of an, if you were further back than this, too much of a descending blow, hitting out excessively, so you'd be steeping out to the right, and you would then start to do other things in the swing to try and shallow that out. So you might find that your rate of extension increases, or the overtaking rate on the golf club as that increases, the overtaking rate on the golf club increases to try and get some lift on it and some loft on it as well. So you've moved your ball forward a little bit. You asked whether that was a band-aid approach. I would say at this stage that it isn't. It's something that you need to consider, and as a general rule, if you consider sort of 2 balls back from the centre of the arc is generally speaking sort of in line with where the badge on your shirt would be. So if you're wearing a crested shirt, the badge is generally speaking sort of mid left pectoral, and that in turn is going to have the ball positioned approximately 2 to 3 balls back of the centre of the arc, allowing you to hit down sufficiently to get some good contact, to maintain a reasonable amount of loft on the golf club so that you don't have to add other adjustments through the hit in order to get the flight that you want. So from a setup standpoint, I quite like what you're doing, but the ball position moving forward is definitely the way to go, and I would consider perhaps, based on that footage, going even further forward. If we go through the swing now, the swings I can't quite synchronise up, so I'm just going to go from sort of P1, P2, etc. and just highlight some areas for you. Face on, P1 to P2. See the lead knee starts to get pulled in a little bit too much. Doesn't really flex forward towards the ball quite as much as you would like it to. And one of the reasons for that is that as you take the club back, the turn tends to be a little bit too level, and you allow the club to roll behind you a little bit. Now these are just my observations at this point, so don't be sort of worrying too much about what the instruction is going to be, because something that I suggest later is going to help alleviate a lot of these problems anyway. So initially the club rolls behind you a little bit. You can see there the wrist hinge and the wrist set tends to be a little bit flat. Again, the camera on the down the line image is a little bit low down. Ideally it would be around about chest height, and that would give a completely different impression of what we're seeing at this point. You mentioned about the lift. Now we need to clarify here between lift and upward action. So you could create an upward action by lifting the arms off the rib cage like so. The problem with that is that would require you to reroute the club in the downswing, relocate your pressure points in your arms and your torso, and some players demonstrate that and can carry that out to a sort of a very high degree. Most players can't. So what I'd like to see is, I'd like to see the, and I'm going to concentrate more on the face-on footage here, I'd like to see the left arm and therefore the butt of the club be propelled further, courtesy of what the body's doing. Not necessarily lifting the arms, that's slightly different, but I'd certainly like to see the butt of the club and the lead arm travel further, and I'm going to explain how that's going to happen and how you need to achieve that. So from a relatively short backswing, relatively deep backswing, you've got to thrust pretty hard to try and generate some power. If you didn't do that, you'd just be chipping the ball forward. That's also going to help you shallow out your angle of attack, so the more the pelvis thrusts towards the target, the more axis tilt we create coming into the golf ball, the higher the lead shoulder gets early, which means the arc is widening and therefore shallowing. Problem with that is it creates a situation where the club is passing the hands too quickly, as you can see there, and you tend to get that sort of rolled and flipped look through impact, where you're losing both the right hand flying wedge and the left hand flying wedge. And you can see there the arms are already getting thrown away from the torso at that point. Much of this is because of the way you take the club back, so I'm going to focus primarily on that, and then I'm going to come back to the down the line footage towards the end of the session and just give you a little bit of food for thought. Whilst it's not a priority, it is something that you might want to consider when out there practicing, just to vary things up and just to start drip feeding some good stuff into your through swing. So for now I'm going to concentrate mainly on the backswing. Okay, so in regards to propelling the butt of the club further during the backswing, creating some potential power and certainly making it easier for you to sequence your downswing, the thing we need to consider is the way the spine operates. So the spine, obviously you can break down into three main areas. You've got the lower spine, lumbar region, mid spine, thoracic region, and upper spine stroke neck, cervical region. So as you move up the spinal column, each area or each section becomes gradually more flexible. So in your swing, you're engaging the lumbar and you're engaging the thoracic. You're trying to get the neck tilts in there, but then you see how the neck tilts come out, and they sort of come out just as you start to complete the backswing. Now with Troy, what we're going to see is someone who's engaging each section, and he's doing so for as long as possible. The neck tilts are going to go in early, pelvis is extending, lumbar region is extending, thoracic region is extending, etc, etc. As he gets to the top of the backswing, the biggest difference between you and Troy at this point would be to do with the sort of neck tilt. So you can see if I took a line coming sort of directly out of your left ear, yours is pointing sort of almost like towards the target, whereas in Troy's case it's coming a little bit more down to the ground. So that's engaging the most flexible part of his spine. He's also got more extension in the thoracic, so you're looking at almost the chest would have a feel of pointing to the sky a little bit more, as opposed to, again, being sort of pointed almost ever so slightly to the sky, but not enough. You've got a lot of extension in the trail leg, which is great, as does Troy. And your pelvis has come out of its forward tilt considerably, which is a sign that you're extending the pelvis. So what we've got to look at is higher up the sort of food chain, if you will. We want to feel like, and this is a really simple piece of instruction for you, but something I want to concentrate on throughout the work that we do, and that is that the chest points to the sky and the ear points to the ground at P4. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get some footage up of a guy that I was working with recently on this and show you the before and afters, so you get a feel for the type of movement that I want you to make. Okay, on the right here is a gentleman called Dave, who I've spent some time working with over the past few years. And one of the things that Dave's had is a lot of injury problems, knees, hips, etc. And generally struggles with getting the club to get any sort of length on it. Historically, he has tried to lift the arms, etc. And that's not really boded too well. You can see there, very similar left arm travel to yourself. Very level with the eyes. Ear pointing straight down to the to the target. And again, very similar to your sort of action in regards to the extension of the neck. So what we did was we worked on a very simple feel, which was a combination of it, and you can choose whichever one you like and whichever one works best. It was either a feeling of get the ear to the ground or get the chest to the sky at P4. Nothing else. Chest to the sky or ear to the ground You see when he does that, the amount of travel on the left arm increases significantly without any real lifting of the arms. So you can see the difference in the neck tilts at this point. Chest is a little bit more up. Dave, to be fair, had quite a good extension of his thoracic, not a great extension of his neck. With yourself, it's a little bit of both that needs to be improved. So chest to the sky, ear to the ground. The act of doing this will encourage the lead shoulder to work down for longer, so you're almost like reverse engineering the takeaway. As you take the club back, you'll find that the club rolls less. As the club rolls from P1 to P2, the lead shoulder tends to stay high and the forward bend tends to be maintained. The act of trying to get the chest to the sky and the ear to the ground will tend to discourage the lead shoulder and the lead knee from working across, and will start to encourage a little bit more of a turn on a tilted angle as opposed to a turn that is a little bit too level. But your main area of focus at the moment should be at P4. We want the ear to be as far to the ground as you can get it, and the chest to be as far to the sky as you can get it. When you're doing that, you'll get a shock at how far your left arm travels, how far the butt of the club travels, without you actually lifting the arms off the rib cage. Now, I also mentioned some down the line sort of thoughts or down the line feels. I'm just going to briefly touch on that before we wrap things up. Okay, so we touched on the down the line issues of the roll and the flip, and we talked about how the backswing changes are going to help you in the sense that you won't need to thrust quite as hard, which means you won't extend quite as much, which means you'll be able to rotate through it a little bit more. But you can see as you thrust and extend, the right arm straightens out very quickly, and pressure point 5, which is the right arm against the torso, particularly your right elbow, gets away from your side very quick from sort of P6.5 to P8. So whenever you do that, there's going to be increased closure on the club face. You have no choice on the matter. If you didn't do that, you'd block this thing so far right, it would be unbelievable. So that's your attempt to somehow turn the corner down at the bottom. Now as you extend more on the way back, and you don't have to thrust as much on the way through, this should start to diminish. However, there's no guarantee, so I want to just give you some ideas, or an idea, a really simple one, on what to do to try and calm that down. You can see as Mike comes through, the right elbow does move away from the side a little bit, but nowhere near as early. Right arm's still got a little bit of give in it when he gets to P7, and then it starts to straighten out more, P7 to 7.2. You can see there that the right elbow is still a little bit closer, or considerably closer to the side than what we see with yourself. So once you get the extension and the feeling that the chest to the sky and the ear to the ground, what I'd like you to do is just hit some partial shots. These don't want to be full shots, just partial shots with a head cover trapped beneath the elbow on the side. Now, when you're doing this, it's going to give you a very, very exaggerated feel of sort of pivoting differently. You'll get the feel of the right shoulder being lower through the hip, so more of a turn on a tilted angle through the ball as well as on the way back. You see the difference in your shoulders to Mike's there. But it's very important when you're doing this that you don't take it back much further than waist level and through much further than waist level, because it is a very exaggerated drill. So head cover off your 3-wood of your driver, trap it under your right elbow, not under the arm, under the elbow, and just hit some little swings with a relatively lofty club, something like an 8 or a 9 iron, and you'll soon get the feel of what that right arm should be doing and how the wrists unhinge a little bit less and how the club face is a little bit more passive through the hit, so that you can then transfer that over into your full swing. That may be something that we need to look at in future online lessons, but for now I just want to introduce that in regards to a sort of tidying up process. Good luck with it, Frank. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop me a line on Messenger as you did before. Hopefully this all makes sense, and I look forward to watching the progress in the coming months.